Meanwhile, I want to welcome to the programme David Davis, the former Conservative Party chair, former Shadow Home Secretary. David, welcome to you.
Hi.
Hi, what are your thoughts on what you've been hearing?
Well, I laughed out loud, frankly. Somebody I told it to said, "Oh, Tony Blair is still in charge then, or at least the Blair Institute is." I mean, these ideas, as you intimated, come up every so often, typically from people who are both technologically informed and constitutionally careless. When we defeated the Blair attempt to introduce ID cards before, when they started, they had 80% of the public on side. That's what the polling numbers said. And then what happened was that the state lost, I think, 20-something million, maybe 26 million tax records, a couple of CDs, I think it was. And all of a sudden, 70% of the public became against ID cards. It wasn't my brilliant campaigning. It was just the events.
Yes.
You think what happens today? You mentioned the NHS, but what about all the other computer disasters? The entire post office disaster is off a computer failure. Afghan refugees, the ransomware against Marks and Spencers. The cost 300 million. Marks and Spencers shut it down for weeks.
Yeah.
All of those things can go wrong, and it isn't just the sort of technically incompetent states that suffers this. I had a quick look at the top 10 database crashes, losses. Yahoo, Meta, Twitter, LinkedIn, Adobe, Microsoft, Google. Some of the most sophisticated data handlers in the world have lost vast amounts of data. Now, that's bad enough when, maybe in the case of the NHS, it's your health records. But what is everything? So all of a sudden, let's say China or some would-be ransomer gets hold of your medical records, your financial records and so on, and carefully sifts through them to see what's embarrassing.
Yeah. I mean, the list of objections is very long indeed. And I'm going to mark you down as a sceptic, shall I? I mean, that seems to be pretty clear. Times have changed, David, as you know, since the Blair government floated this idea and tried to push it, make progress on it. One thing that's changed is the asylum seeker crisis is upon us. Calling it a crisis, it's a political crisis at the very, very least. And that would have had a bearing on government thinking. And another thing that's rather changed, although the Blair government was quite keen on this at the time too, but now you've got, clearly they're floating this idea with the idea of getting on with it. So if you fight again, and I've no doubt you will, looks like this time you're going to be up against it.
No, it'll be a slightly different battlefield. Last time it was terrorism, remember? This time, well, what they're going to do, they're going to stop people in the street and ask them for their digital ID. Is that what they're going to do? So, it's not going to be illegal immigrants they're being stopped.
But that's where I guess that's where it needs to be. We don't have the details yet, but if you've got an ID card scheme, it has to be compulsory, or there's no point.
It's got to be compulsory. It's got to be for everybody, and then why? What is it that a digital ID card will give you that a national insurance number wouldn't? For example, we've all got a national insurance number. Why haven't they used that if this is such a clever idea? The trouble with this idea, like so many Blairite ideas, which is frankly what this is they're great headlines and rubbish policies.
Yeah,
we saw this time and again. Even Estonia, your new political editor cited Estonia. Go back and look at the crashes there. The hideous crash that happened in 2007.
Yes,
and they're very sophisticated. They're good at this.
But if we look abroad, let's look at Europe, David. And I mean, apart from Denmark and us in the UK, all other countries in the EU have ID cards, have some sort of ID card scheme.
Yep, that's right. And we used to think it was really a rather good thing about living in Britain, that you couldn't have a policeman come up to you and say, "Papers, please. Ausweis bitte." Our relationship with the state is different. And you're finding states, in American states, actually passing laws against the misuse of some of this data. Even Belgium's passing laws against misuse of surveillance data and so on. So the fact that we're different doesn't mean that we're worse off. We're not. They can't handle their migrant issues any better than we can. Germany's has had a very long tradition of identity cards. Hasn't stopped 1 million migrants arriving illegally in Germany. Not one of them. As I say, it's a great headline, sounds very plausible until you start to work through it. Bear in mind, John, yeah, my first degree was in computer science. I mean, I've been studying this subject for, in one way or another, for nearly 50 years. There are loads and loads of problems. You had the same thing with NHS data. They don't think it through properly, and then it goes wrong. And then the people who become the victims of their failures are ordinary, decent people who've had their privacy invaded.
All right.
And then out of that, you get all the problems.
All right, David, it's always a pleasure to talk to you with that. And let's call it the case for the opposition.